In this video, we're going to look at how to load instruments into Logic and the best way to lay out your track with your instruments as well. When you add a new track in Logic, the one that you want to use is a software instrument track. So one way of doing it is like I've just done. You click on track at the top, a new software instrument track. The shortcut again is Command, Alt, and S. Really helpful to use that. That's one that you will use a lot. Just you can quickly hover. Quick tip, you can just put your thumb across both Alt and Command and hit S, and you can really quickly open new software instrument tracks like so. Another way, if it's a blank track, if you just double click underneath, if you wanted another software instrument track, or you could double click underneath. If you had an audio track selected and double click, it will add an audio track. That's another quick way of adding tracks. Or there's the plus button here. Again, click the plus, and then you can choose what type of track it is, such as a software instrument. And finally, there's this duplicate button. So if I already had a track set up, I'll just quickly load one. You can duplicate the track in the exact same way, and it will duplicate all the effects and everything that you have set up on there as well. Let's get rid of those for now. So we have a blank software instrument track here. And then to open our library, it's on this draw menu up here, or the shortcut is Y. And that opens up our library, our sound library within Logic. Logic groups instruments quite cleverly. It's all fairly intuitive. Bass, drum kits, obvious, electronic drum kits, guitar. Mallets are things like marimba and vibraphone, orchestral percussion, piano, studio horns, studio strings, synthesizers, vintage sections, world instruments, which there's a whole host of really cool sounds and things within as well. And then there's arpeggiated instruments, cinematic instruments like drones, plucks, moments, textures, and legacy instruments. These are things from GarageBand and the old Logic Jam packs, which they give you access to as well in case there's a specific sound that you were interested in. So really loads of things. And the first thing I did when I bought Logic is pretty much go through them all and see what they all do. And I'd really recommend doing that. If you've not heard the sound of a marimba before, load it up, see what it sounds like, and have a listen to it. And that is exactly how you load them up. You simply click on it. Make sure you have the track that you want to change clicked in the main menu, and then you click on the instrument that you would like to load, and it will automatically load everything straight away. There are some conventions when it comes to instrument layouts. If you look at orchestral scores, you'll see it's always woodwinds at the top, then brass, then percussion, and then strings at the bottom. Really, for your own projects, it's up to you, but I'd recommend trying to keep them by sections. If you have your string section all grouped together, and your percussion instruments all grouped together, and your brass instruments all grouped together, which order you put those in your window is entirely up to you. I always recommend going high to low as well, though. So have your higher instruments in a section at the top and your low instruments at the bottom. That's fairly standard. And then again, work out what you need quick access to and how you can get access to that quickly and what's going to look best for you. If you're working with songs, for example, you might put drums at the bottom, bass instruments, chord instruments like harmony, guitar and piano, and then your melody instrument, your vocal at the top. And you might want to replicate that in the style of piece you're creating. Maybe you're creating a piece that has a drum beat under it, a bass line, a piano part, and then a melody, one single melody instrument, in which case melody, piano or guitar, bass, and drums at the bottom is going to be the best way to lay it out. Another thing to consider as well is articulations for the instrument that we're using. For example, on a string instrument, you might plan on having long bowed legato sections as well as plucked pizzicato sections on the strings, in which case you need to decide whether you want to have those both on the same track, which you can do in Logic, or whether you want to have a separate track for each. Again, I would recommend having a separate track for each. It allows you more control when you come to mixing and getting a really good sound out of the two of them. We will look at articulation sets in Logic, which is where you can control the articulations on one track, as well as other options too. Something else you might want to consider is whether you're going to be using a string pad or a whole full string section where you might load up all the instruments and just playing chords on the piano yourself, or whether you are actually going to go that extra mile and think individually about violins, violas, cellos, and double basses. And that's per section, not just strings. You'll notice in Logic, if, for example, in our studio strings section instruments, you can load up, they have a selection of pre-mixed string sections. And when you click on that, you get one track which you can just play your parts in, and it automatically attempts to split that out across violins 1, violins 2, and cellos, which is really, really clever. Or if you want to, you can record those individual parts in as well. So that's something you want to think about as you're loading your instruments too, how much detail you're actually going to go into. For now, I'm just going to load a few simple instruments. I'm going to load a piano. And again, even that's a decision. You have to listen to each of those piano sounds and decide which one's going to work best on your piece. And we can also edit the sound a little bit later on. I'm going to load a string section, and I'm going to choose an orchestral string section. I'm going to go full string ensemble. And just for now, I'm also going to load up a brass section, full brass. Another thing that can be really good to do at this stage is to name and color your instruments. Just like we colored our markers before, you can actually color your instrument tracks. I'll just close my library so we have a bit more space on screen. And again, you can click on the track, open your colors, Command C, and then select the color that you want that track to be. Now you can't actually see the color on the track, but when you record, it will make the region this color. And that can really help you see at a glance what's happening in each section. For 3 instruments, it might be a bit overkill, but if we had lots of instruments loaded, again, it's really helpful. And think about how you want to color your tracks. You don't have to do it the same way as everybody else, but you could do all of your string instruments the same color, for example, as well as all of your brass instruments the same color. Or you could do all of your melody instruments one color, harmony instruments another color, and rhythm instruments another color. Or you could do it by articulation, where all of your legato parts are one color, and then all of your pizzicato or staccato parts are a different color. That's entirely up to you, and it's another decision that you'll have to make. It's also a good idea to name them. I mean, this is called Steinway Grand Piano. Do you really need to know the difference between whether it's going to be a Steinway piano or just the piano for your track? By naming them, you'll have a better idea of what they're called, and also when you record, the regions will be named the same as the track as well. Again, if you're just further along, it just helps you see things at a glance a lot easier. And finally, if you want a little bit of extra control, you can actually change the images on these instruments too. That can be helpful if you're working with synth instruments, for example, or if you're loading things that don't have standard pictures on them. If you own sample libraries external to Logic, when you import those, they don't actually have the images automatically loaded like these ones too. So all you do to change it is to right-click, and then you can just select whichever instrument logo you want to have. So I'm going to put this one as a bagpipes just for fun. So now I've got piano with a piano picture, strings with strings, and brass with a picture of bagpipes for some reason.